So this morning is a liturgical mashup day. Who knew that there was such a thing? But it's Epiphany Sunday. Epiphany was yesterday, and it is Baptism of Jesus Sunday. And while we could have chosen one or the other to focus on, your worship team could not bear to leave anything out without a little bit of examination and taking it into our hearts. So, I am going to read this morning the text about the three kings from Matthew, except it's not about three kings, but rather the text is about three Gentile astronomers from Persia or Babylon who followed their curiosity and their awe and their wonder to the place where the Jewish child Jesus was born. There's some things I want to say before I read this text. This is a story about a people who will not be corrupted by the fear and greed of those who are in power. Herod the king is sitting on the throne in Jerusalem, and he was put there by the power of Rome. So he summons to him these wise people, these magi, because to him, he is hearing others talking about this birth of a king, the king of the Jews, and a king born to set the people free. And you know who was oppressing those people? Herod, right? So it's thrilling to the people that the Messiah is to be born, the King of the Jews is to be born, but to Herod, this is terrifying news. So he summons to him the Magi, and he tells them that he too is interested in learning about this King of the Jews. And what I keep thinking about is, do you remember from The Little Mermaid? Ursula, she calls to her those eels, Flotsam and Jetsam, right? Because she wants that Little Mermaid's voice. It feels to me like Herod is summoning the Magi because he wants to know where this baby is so that he can steal his life. Because this child born has the power to topple his regime. But the Magi know better. They follow the star. I love these stars. We were just talking about the fact that I never want them to be taken down. They follow the star and they behold the child, the hope of the world, and they choose to listen to their guts, which tell them that this is not the way of God, this going back to Herod and reporting what they have found. They choose to go home by another way. They will not collude with oppressive power. So this is from Matthew's Gospel, and it's Eugene Peterson's paraphrase. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem Village, Judah territory, this was during Herod's kingship, a band of scholars arrived in Jerusalem from the east, and they asked around, where can we find and pay homage to the newborn King of the Jews? We observed a star in the eastern sky that signaled his birth, and we are on a pilgrimage to worship him. When word of their inquiry got around to Herod, he was terrified. And not Herod alone, but most of Jerusalem as well. Herod lost no time. He gathered all the high priests and religion scholars in the city together, and he asked, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? And they told him, Bethlehem, Judah territory. The prophet Micah wrote about this. So Herod then arranged a secret meeting with the scholars from the east. And pretending to be as devout as they were, he got them to tell him exactly when the birth announcement star appeared. And then he told them the prophecy about Bethlehem and said, go and find this child, leave no stone unturned, and as soon as you find him, send word and I will join you at once in your worship. Instructed by the king, they set off. And then the star appeared again, the same star they had seen in the eastern skies, and it led them on until it hovered over the place of the child, and they could hardly contain themselves. They were in the right place. They had arrived at the right time. So they entered the house, and they saw the child in the arms of his mother Mary. And overcome, they kneeled and they worshiped him. And then they opened their luggage and presented gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And in a dream, they were warned not to report back to Herod. So they worked out another route, and they left the territory without being seen. And they went home by another way. May God add a blessing to the reading of this word. So Epiphany, the season of Epiphany, is all about light and about how it is God is made manifest in our midst to outsiders and to insiders. Some 23 years ago, I was serving in Duluth at the Coppertop Church. Maybe you can picture it. It sits at the top of the hill. Duluth First had been in the midst of downtown Duluth, but it moved up the hill, and since that time, it had sought ways to be engaged with the lives of the people in the community. One of the ministries we were involved with was called CHUM, Churches United in Ministry. It's an organization much like Align here in Minneapolis. CHUM operated a homeless shelter and a drop-in shelter and a food shelf, among other things. Well, a team of people from First United Methodist determined that we wanted to provide a meal and some worship for people who were staying at the shelter. And we got there early on a December afternoon many years ago, and we set ourselves up, and it took only a little bit of time to discover that we had not planned well. The veggies in the stew were very al dente, right? They were so crisp in a very raw kind of way. And folks were getting hungry and they were getting restless, and we were starting to feel uncomfortable because we privileged outsiders had brought in a meal and ourselves trying to do a good thing, and we did not want to disappoint the very people that we sought to serve. So what could we do? The discomfort in the room was palpable. So, as one does, I took out my guitar. We had planned to lead some worship during the time together, so I had my guitar with me. I don't carry it everywhere, I promise you. And I started to fiddle around with some chords on my guitar, and I began to sing one of the best Leonard Cohen pieces ever written, Suzanne. Can I hear an amen? And people began to gather, and you can only imagine we rolled into what's the next best thing, Blowin' in the Wind, right? Because everybody knows Blowin' in the Wind. And more people began to gather and join in the singing. And then we began to move into singing Christmas carols together. And there came to be in our midst a presence more powerful than our fear of one another. Through our shared voices, we became the palpable Word made flesh in that shelter. We were united in that room by the stunning wonder of making a witness together and making home. And we shared that meal eventually, when it was finally ready to eat. And as we did, we were able to talk to each other. We listened as people shared their grief about spending Christmas on the streets. And we could talk about the pain of past mistakes, each of us past mistakes, and our concern about current injustice. And we prayed for each other. And we left that place knowing the fragile miracle of beholding the Christ child had been offered and received. we were welcomed in from the cold. So on that freezing night, you know how Duluth is, right? As we shuffled our way down the hill to our cars, knowing that the power of fear run amok in our midst is real. And we know that fear yet, don't we? The abuse of power that continues to oppress people yet. We know it because people are still struggling for the word to become flesh in our public policies. But Epiphany, and that long ago Duluth night, and every day we are given to live is an opportunity for us to trust that God works miracle in this world, and that is the star by which we will guide our lives. Because, my friends, we not only celebrate the dazzle of the stars and the intrepid who followed long ago, we celebrate on this day the power of how it is we are, each one of us, drenched not only in the light of hope, but also in the water of God's grace. We're going to name today the power of our baptism, and how it is that when Jesus was baptized, some 30 years after the event you just heard about, I told you it's a liturgical mashup. It's a very big fast forward. 30 years after the Magi bow in homage to Mary and Joseph and the child, that child, Jesus, wades into the Jordan River and is baptized by John. And the words that sound from the heavens as Jesus rises from the water are these: This is my Son, my beloved. With him I am well pleased. And that sounding from the heavens continues yet today. Those words sound out over you and out over your whole life with every breath you are given to take. There's a young man here who I baptized some 10 years ago, who I haven't seen for a good long time. And when you were baptized, the heavens opened and God said, "You are beloved." And it's no less true for each of us. You are beloved by God. Believe that good news. You are God's beloved, and God is so nuts in love with you. God is well pleased. There are no outsiders. There are no insiders. There are all of us seeking to live God's vision for grace. So we're going to remember that today. Pastor Laura and I are going to lead you in the speaking of the vows that were made by you or by the people who brought you for baptism. And if you have not been baptized as we experience these vows, they're no less meaningful. God's love for you is no less intense. There are no insiders and there are no outsiders in God's heart. So we will pray together over the gift of the water. And when you come forward to share in the meal of Jesus, which is bread, which is grape juice, which is not uncooked vegetables, right? But it's no less essential for our bodily and soul well-being. We are going to give you an opportunity to experience a remembering of your baptism. We will trace the sign of the cross either on your forehead, or if you would prefer, just put your hand out and we will do it on your hand. And we will say to you, remember your baptism and give thanks. And you will be blessed and you will be fed because you are. Amen.